This is the Band School Podcast, where we talk about business, adventure, and mission with your host, Buddy Rathmel.
All right, I'm here with Clayton Ferguson. We go back about 20 years when one of our lifelong friends in common, Jeff Rackinator, got married. And all I remember about Clayton is that he had a convertible and that he was heading out to LA because he was a rock star. And so, Clayton, tell us in about 60 seconds your journey to this point.
I wouldn't call it a rock star, but I'm right after college in '96. I know, go figure it. That dates me right there. Moved to Nashville, got in the music business, was on a bunch of records, toured the world, and had a lot of fun. But then you realize there's no money to be made in music business whatsoever. So I got into artist management, which is essentially glorified babysitting. And that kind of brought me out to Los Angeles. I got a job out there at a record label. And 6 months after that, the record label, they realized the same thing that I had said earlier. There's no money in the music business. So they decided we're cutting out of there and we're going to start making movies. So I ended up at the same company became Walden Media. So we got to do, and I got to be part of a marketing team by accident, completely. The Chronicles of Narnia is a lot of, there's some faith undercurrents in every movie that we did. And it was a lot of fun. So working on the Narnia movies was just an amazing opportunity 15 years ago. I had this crazy idea in the middle of it about, like, I'd really love to bring Narnia to life. So I had this idea to make it through a walkthrough exhibition where you're having a story. And you know what? Like, it actually made so much sense that I left Walden to come with another company to bring that exhibition to life. And I just found that I loved the storytelling of experience where you're able to capture 360 when you're walking through something and really experience every bit of it. So it was kind of an accident along the way, and I figured out what I loved after doing what I wasn't really good at, which was music and film, but stumbled into it backwards, but I loved it. Yeah.
So tell us, this podcast is about business, adventure, and mission. And there's probably the dream of being a rock star is something that a lot of people have. So just tell us in 30 seconds what that life was like. And I know you went by the moniker Chili Dog at one concert.
Oh, stop
it. Tell us about that.
Well, Nashville's a weird world. So I had my own band, and we got signed, and we were a step away from fame and fortune, and then everything falls apart. That's what happens in the music business. I ended up joining a couple of quite semi-famous in the Christian world. I ended up joining the band and right at the peak of their fame, but we got to sell a lot of records and tour it. But the weird thing is Katy Perry was opening up for us, on half the tour, and it's just the strange thing is it's very empty at the end of the day, unless you really have a deep-seated character depth. And for the most part, you really want to be famous, but then you find yourself not even close to it. And then, or you're acting like it on stage, but then you walk off stage and you realize that it's just a depth in your heart because what you want, you're not reaching. Or in our case, we were playing a lot to, churches, and you have a faith in it, but you also want to somewhat be famous. And there's a conflict of interest that is really hard to go back and forth to. Yeah. So it's a lonely thing when you're kind of really pursuing that. So don't really recommend it.
Tell us a little bit about your faith journey and how that went through all of the pursuing fame and fortune and all those kind of things.
Buddy, it really does a mind trick to you. Again, when you're on stage, what it does is it tells you have all people that are telling you you're great, and then you walk off, and it's really just you by yourself. And like I just mentioned, the disparity between the two really caused a lot of questions, and it really, in that world, I'll be really honest. There's a lot of people who struggle with that, and where you end up going to it is somewhat bad places, and you really need other people's reassurances. You need all of these things that really are not really character. It's pretty vapid. And, over the years, you look back and you realize you kind of lose who you are when you're listening to what other people want or what you want, and even couching it over other things. But it's a challenging thing to look back because you lose it day by day, and it's not a quick thing. I don't know anybody who just goes one day, oh, I'm just going to go do something nuts. But it's something that it's a long trip, and it's a long path.
Yeah. So what is I don't know how your faith and your entrepreneurial journey, how those things have joined, but I see that you've done a lot of things around location-based entertainment. You have your own agency now, agency808.com, where you're doing some of these experiential things. So tell us about your journey to your own business and what that has been like for you.
Well, it's an interesting one. So in LA, I found a lot of strange success, in this entertainment business, or at least success what other people would say. But the minute when you're in it, you're never happy. You're always looking for the next thing. And along the way, I took a job as senior vice president at a major ad agency we'd focus on movies and film. And the problem is that you end up with marketing agencies like that we did. We would get the movies that had challenges. So, we're trying to find a new angle for people to go want to see this movie. But a lot of time it's horror movies. It's stuff that's really not good stuff. And without even realizing it, you realize I'm a used car salesman. I don't even believe the words that are coming out of my mouth. And, you're at a pinnacle where people think it's cool and that you have this high paying thing. And it's just, it's empty. It's the most vapid moment. And, at that point, I heard God just say, "What are you doing?" And I had a major change when I was 40 years old, 6 years ago. And overnight, I just quit my job. I heard the Lord say, "Hey, it's time to change things up. It's time to start from scratch. Let's go back to character and pull everything else out of the way." So I had no idea what I was going to do, quit my job. Everybody thought I was nuts. I just packed my car and drove back to Nashville. And, it's about at the end of the day, it's about storytelling. I believe life is about storytelling. It's like, how do we understand what other people's stories are and our own stories? But sometimes you have to really start over in them to really discover it. So I moved back to Nashville knowing what I wanted to do, which is really kind of where I've kind of ended up with the company over the last 6 years. But it just really, it's about starting over. And 6 years later, it's starting to really kick into gear. So it's a process of I had no idea what that next step was going to be. And, come hell or high water, it's gotta take that leap.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, our friend Rack that we have in common, when I asked him about you, he said, Clayton is innovative, hardworking, and filled with integrity. So cool shout out from Jeff there, and all things that are great if you're going to be building your own company. Do you have any kind of principles that guide you?
Yeah, I think I try to live up to those now, buddy. Again, kind of even saying backwards, when I realized I didn't have integrity, at certain times, and I didn't believe my words, I think that what I found is that you only have your word and your character. And if I'm trying to sell something that isn't real, or if I don't believe in, what's the point? People aren't going to believe anything. I'm just a salesman. So I think it's about transparency and honesty on top of those. So I believe in business. It's in our world, people hide things a lot, but it's like even the younger generations, there's much more of a belief in transparency. It's like, hey, I'll just show you exactly how this works. I'm not going to try to play a game with you. And I've just kind of built my business on being true to my word and being honest with people. And even if it means me losing a project or it going away, I believe it's more important than trying to spin something in any sort of way to try to get what you want.
Yeah, cool. Do you have any quote or song lyrics that kind of inspire you on a regular basis?
I'm a big history fan. I mean, I'd say Winston Churchill. There's a million of them. I'd say C.S.
Yeah.
Lewis, but I have to go back to just the adversity that Churchill went through. He has this great one that I remind myself daily. Success is going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm.
I love it.
How often do we really get those successes? And it's more about the adversity than it is about the success. And I think that's life.
Yeah, that's cool. Last time I was in London, I actually wanted to go visit the Churchill Museum right there.
Have you been in?
No, it was closed the last day I was there. So have you been in there?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. If you're a history buff or like them, it's just, you imagine you're trying to run a country to try to getting them from quitting when you're the only one left standing and there's bombs falling and you're still out walking around and telling people that they can do it. Yeah. And I can't imagine the fortitude that it took to do that every single day. Just the enthusiasm to get your own team, not much less the entire country. So it's unbelievable. You should go there.
Yeah, I love the story of just, there's basically one man that was standing up for the West in a sense, that way ahead of anyone else. It's really fascinating. In the last few months, I was reading a biography or something about Churchill. Oh, it was in a book by Richard Koch, the 80-20 guy. And he talked about how when Churchill was 16, he said to one of his friends, I feel like someday I'm going to save London in a time of war. Wow. 16 years old, he had that thought in his life. And I always think about these destiny markers or these phrases or thoughts or whatever. Like what in my perspective, I think God put that in his mind at some point so that he was kind of on that trajectory. But like, who has that thought when they're 16? Like, someday I'm going to save this city,
Well, you want to know something even crazier? So again, he was like the Lord of the Navy in World War I, and so he single-handedly almost destroyed Britain's. He had a major thing where it was a major failure, where he was at a young age in charge of it, and he had a massive failure. He's basically kicked out at the height of where he thought that he was, maybe even fulfilling his destiny. 20 years later, it wasn't until he actually had that chance. So from the point of such a massive failure to where you get back that chance, that's 20 years of time. And so, from the time I saw you last until this, it's like, that's forever. But, it's funny. Sometimes you get a couple chances to do it. Yeah.
Well, and honestly, I think most of the time you do need a couple chances. I had, after we did the anti-trafficking work, I dumped $250,000 into a couple businesses, actually more, but to a business in Cambodia, a business here in Thailand, escape rooms. We went huge. We had rooms that moved and water, and we were with the largest franchisor in the world, and we had some of the best rooms that they had in the whole world. They were just amazing. Like hand cranked elevators that would take you to different levels, and just super cool experiences. But we built way too big, and I ended up losing $250,000. And I jumped into that because I felt like God was like, hey, I want you to facilitate a disciple making movement through business. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to jump into business. And a few months in, I'm like, God, I'm just trying to make it work. You have to like tack a movement onto the top of this. And I felt like God was like, no, that's not how this works. And so I kind of stepped back from movement for a couple years, and I just was like, okay, I'm doing some consulting and training and running a school, my first BAM school, to help people with their businesses. But this last year I was like, okay, I want to come back to that movement piece that I felt like God kind of put on my heart. And I'm reading a book on movements, and it's like 2 a.m. I'm here. I have a lazy boy right over there on the other side of my office, and I'm reading in the middle of the night, and the author says a lot of times when people have this feeling of this call or direction from the Lord, they run ahead of him and they fall flat on their face, and they're humiliated and humbled to the place where then God can actually use them to the thing that he had showed them that he had called them for. And I'm just sitting in my chair weeping, going, God, could you have taught me that for less than $250,000? Isn't there an easy way to earn that or learn it?
I can second that. I think failure and just I think a humbling is one of the most important things to have with business. I mean, the minute that you have arrogance, you're looking through something through a different lens, and for a period of years, almost I had this arrogance over me where it's like I could almost do no wrong. Yeah. But suddenly, we all know that humbling moment. And the moment when that changes, it felt like for years I could do no right. So it's like the humility is something that it takes a long time to get back to. But when you're grounded in that, you make so much of a better decisions than when it's based upon just, the arrogance of it. I made so many mistakes, even the first couple of years of my business 6 years ago, just because I love to go big. Anything that I try to do, that I end up doing, it's about going big. And it's always what God has been saying to me is like, look, go back small. It's about the one person. It's about one person. It's not about thousands of people. It's not about this. Let's go back. Let's get small. But we had some success pretty quick in our business. And, my first thing I'm going to do is, let's staff up. So we started staffing up. And the work didn't come because we had one client, that was the basis of it. And so when that one client suddenly slows down a little bit, then you're having to let people go. And that's one of the hardest things to do I've ever found. Yeah. Yeah. Walk before you run.
I've had to fire a couple of people, over the years, which isn't fun. But then when I had to let 15 people go when my businesses went under and you're the main one and it's your fault. That's a tough situation. For me, one of the cool things was I've helped 5 of my former employees launch their own business. So there's a little bit of in fact, I just was at one of the restaurants that one of them started about 4 or 5 nights ago. But letting the people go that is a tough piece. What advice would you give to your 25-year-old self, Clayton, about business in particular?
I think part of it is just keep going. I think success is staying at it. Every failure, getting back up and doing it again, getting back on the horse. Yeah. But, I think really, I wish I would have started off on my own with my own business much, much earlier. Yeah, I think that there's a fear that is so pervasive that we have to go and work for somebody else. And I always knew that I was an entrepreneur, but it's like you almost until that cliff, jumping off of a cliff is really, really scary. It's like I would have jumped off a lot earlier, and it's so much more fulfilling. Yeah. So I've loved every bit of it. It's terrifying, but it's like trying something and failing. It's one of the best things if you can learn it from it and just don't make the same mistake twice. Yeah. So I think that's my thing is I've learned to never make the same mistake twice. I just would have taken a chance earlier rather than working for corporations.
Yeah, agreed. I look back now, I tried a couple businesses right after college. I was selling roses door to door. I was selling meat. I was I was working for a carpet cleaner, and then I was like, hey, I should do my own upholstery cleaning business. And then I ended up in corporate America working for a Fortune 250. But now I look back, and the best thing I did in that time was I bought an apartment building. That was just a great investment. And I was like, man, instead of working in corporate America, which was a fun experience, I learned stuff, but I would have learned so much more and been so much further ahead if I had just spent those years doing real estate investing, which, I think was a great time. There's always a good time for real estate, but it was a great time back then to be in that. But yeah, I love that idea of doing your own thing, especially if that's in you, right? Like some people are just 9 to 5 and they don't want to think about work at 5 o'clock. And then maybe starting your own thing isn't the best idea. But if it's in you to be an entrepreneur, by all means.
But so much of us, I think it's a taught language. I think it's a skill to try things that I think that we need to be installing into people that, yes, they can. Yes, you're going to fail, but you can do it. Yeah. I think that so many people that have that have the mentality of working for that, it's just because that's what they've been taught. And I believe we should be teaching people to I think it's a massive faith component to try things rather than doing what you're supposed to do sometimes. So going out on faith, you really find, where's the rent going to be at next month? How am I going to pay for this? And so it's terrifying, but you do learn really quickly, like there's a foundation of that. Somehow it always happens if you keep working at it, And so I think it's a skill that I think everybody should try to start their own business at some point in their life, and hopefully the younger part of it. So you get those mistakes past you.
Yeah. And that's part of what I'm trying to do at BAM School is help guide them so that they can learn a little bit and have some boundaries as they go. And one of the unique things, I think, because of my failure, I was looking and researching, the stats on business startup, somewhere between 70 and 90% of businesses, fail in the first 5 years. But a really interesting stat I came across that kind of changed my thinking was businesses that are earning $1 million a year and up, they have a 98% loan payback rate. So it doesn't mean they necessarily all keep going, but they all go enough to pay back the loans to buy them at $1 million and up in revenue. And so actually what I'm looking to do now is buy a business that's already got some management in place, already running, already profitable, and then grow it from there and skip that really hard, the first part that's can be just so draining and killing. It's super exciting. You have less of this, but you also have a little bit more confidence in it going forward.
You know what's interesting on that? Because you're right. So my business, we've been average. We started about $1 million the first year, and we were on track for about 15 last year before everything happened, and we still got to $2.5 million through the grace of everything. But the interesting thing is that on a course of a business, yes, you're right. The first couple of years are just rough. Yeah. But if you can get to 5 or 6 years, that's where the curve really takes off. So there's something about it. If you look at the history of businesses, especially small businesses, entrepreneurs, once you get to the years about 5 to 8 is when you see the craziest jump, because you have that you've done the homework, you've gotten through this stuff, through a lot of the ups and the downs. But that's really where historically you see a lot of the massive growth. But then it starts to stagnate usually at around 8 years. So sometimes you have to find those things that are going to kick it into gear, so you don't rest on your laurels even once you're up at a certain level.
All right, so I'm coming to Nashville in 2.5 years, and I'll slap you to make sure you stay on that trajectory.
Well, I'm about 4.5, actually, about 5 years now. So I'm hoping for that. Maybe if COVID ends up here, we'll see how that goes. But we're feeling cautiously optimistic is what I like to say, or prayerfully and cautiously optimistic.
Yeah. So what can the average business owner? How can they take advantage of the idea that we live in an experience-driven society?
That's a great question. My thought is this. It's like we walk outside of your apartment, your flat, your house, and you are bombarded with hundreds of thousands of messages that are competing for your attention. No matter what you do, you're always being, do I look at this? Or what about this? And at the end of the day, people are not going to remember the words that you're saying, but they will remember what you made them feel. Yeah. So to me, it's like, how can a business stand apart, or what are you doing that are going to evoke an emotion? So my belief on it is that how do you, whatever you got to do, dig in to pull out the heart of what that story is. Again, I'm a big proponent of story. Knowing your own story, knowing the story of the people that you're trying to communicate to, but share the heart, share the vulnerability of it, so they at least understand and feel something, because people remember that. It's like when I say it's an experience economy, I mean, millennials are, and even up to us old people, it's people will pay lots of money to go to concerts. They'll go and go to museums. They'll go to, the films, but they want to feel something. And I think that's really a standout point, whether or not you're starting a business or how do you cut through that clutter, is just trying to find that story that makes it unique to who you are and what you're supposed to do. So that's my take. I try to do it in a world where you walking into a physical experience, where you're walking into it and you're able to really control it. But I think it's more challenging how to craft your messaging that is different from everybody else's, just even advertising or one-on-one.
Yeah. So what dreams are you still chasing after?
Man, dreams change. I'm 46 and I have a 1 and a 3-year-old. Buddy, I've had a bit of a chip on my shoulder most of my career. It's like, I'm going to show them. And there's something that happens, like, again, there's a change when I hit about 40, and it's like, what is all of this stuff? What does it mean? What good is it? And I think that it ended up just rewinding back to the spot of, starting to have kids and getting married, and like everything changes when you realize it's not about me anymore. It's not about trying to be good or great. It's like you want to live and do something where you're affecting people. Again, I got into entertainment to try to go out and basically speak it to the masses. But really my belief in now it's just one-on-one. It's how do you affect the people next to you? How do you affect the people that have been put into your life? Are you diving into them? So like my dreams now, it's very family focused, and I like to think I'm a humble person. My wife probably would tell me different. And Jeff Rackinator too, sometimes maybe, but, at the end of the day, it's like, I think that, it's just more about the one-on-one relationships and how can I affect people? So my dreams are more small than they were anything else. It used to be big. Now it's very much small and stay in my lane, but do it with humility. And, I've been blessed so far.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Jeff is great at, he's one of my friends that always like brings me back down to earth if I ever get, a little too up. About 5 years ago, I was visiting him in Indianapolis, and, I had business issues that hadn't gone well. I had burned out on the anti-trafficking work, and we had younger people doing the investigations and that kind of stuff. And I was just, at that point, I was like, yeah, I'm ready just to come back to the States and kind of hang it up with the things that we're doing in Thailand. And he just said to me, buck up, Buttercup. You think it's easy here in America? You think I don't want to be like somewhere else, not pastoring a church of 800 people at some point? And it was just a funny, funny kind of, get back in the game kind of talk. And don't be so full of yourself. So how can people connect with you if they want to learn about location-based entertainment for their, for their own business or something that they're doing, or they just want to find out and follow what you're doing in general?
Check us out it's agency808.com. My email is Clayton at agency808.com. Again, it's a different business. I'd love to kind of share with you a little bit more in depth sometime. But I mean, you've been in it with doing the escape rooms. I wish I would have been able to work with you back then. So I might have been able to help, but it's a fun business, but it's about dreaming. You got to dream stuff up, but then you have to go backwards and figure out the business model, but you got to be extremely cautious along the way. So optimism is not a good thing to have in that world.
Just give us an example real quick before we sign off. What are one or two things that you've done, and how has that helped the business?
I just launched a $3 million Crayola exhibition 2 weeks ago in the middle of COVID. Probably the most insane thing I've ever done. I spent 3 years working on this project. I'm one of the owners of it, but it's an exhibition. It's a museum exhibition for families using the brand Crayola. So I licensed the brand, and it's really about the study of the idea, the creative problem solving process. So it's helping kids 6 to 14, a couple up and down, and their parents really understanding the steps of understanding creativity. So you walk out of the exhibition understanding what your creativity and what you can do to add to the world. So it's a ticketed experience that lives in museums for 7 months at a time before it travels around the world for 10 years. So I've been lucky enough to design enough museum experiences over the years with Harry Potter and Narnia and a number of other fun ones. But to me, it's about trying to connect with families and kids these days. It's a lot more rewarding.
That's really cool. So I think right now, as we're recording this, that's live in Philadelphia. Is that where you started it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you're in Philly or you're going to be in Philly in the next 6 months, don't just go to the steps and get your picture doing the Rocky pose. You got to go to the Crayola Idea Experience as well and check that out. So thanks so much, Clayton. I think this was really great for our listeners. You dropped a lot of just, I think, really solid points for people to think about as they're doing their own business. And thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Reach out if ever I can help. I've made plenty of mistakes. I'd love to share some wisdom to get past those. But thanks so much, buddy. Appreciate it.
BAM School, facilitating a global, self-funding, disciple-making movement through business. Thanks for tuning in to the BAM School podcast. Find show notes, free courses, resources, and more at 4bam.com.